everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are working on the rear axle, and throughout the day I have been doing what's called the sub-assembly, and basically that is just adjusting thrust washers and getting all of our tolerances set for the ring and pinion to properly, I guess you could say, mesh together. So anyway, behind me here you see all these, got the two axle shafts, and the differential assembly is taken apart, and we're gonna go ahead and put it all back together. I'll explain what I've been doing throughout the day, because I think it would have been too long of a video for me to show everything that I did today. But it'll go kind of fast putting it together, but just know that in real life it's going to take a little longer than what I'm showing you in the video, because I've already kind of done all of the fine-tuning, and I just took everything back apart, and now it's time to put it all back together for final assembly. So let's get to it. Here we have the two halves of the differential case, and in, I believe, the last video I was showing what was wrong with the with this case whenever I took it apart, where it had a little bit of in and out play, and those are adjusted by these little, they almost look like little coins right here. And so basically what you do is you put these in between the axle shafts, and they kind of just fit right inside of this what's called the spider cross, and the two axles meet there, kind of like how my fingers are, and that's what basically takes up the space and allows the two axles to turn individually in opposite directions whenever you're going around a turn. So now we're gonna go ahead and start putting this together. So the left side of the axle is, or in other words, the driver's side is this side, and it's what carries the load of the ring gear. And this side is the passenger side. So we'll just let that ride there. Take this spider cross and put it right there inside of its home. And it's pretty easy from here. You just kind of go ahead and plug the two halves together, and I'm just gonna get one nut on here just so it doesn't try to fall apart on me. So now, as you can see, the axles move independently of each other, and you don't want them to move very free, but you want them to have just a slight bit of drag, but not enough that, you know, you have to really work to turn it. So it's just kind of one of those things you just kind of have to just kind of go by feel. And then, as I was mentioning earlier from a previous video, you don't want to be able to move these axles in and out. You don't want any of that free play. And that's what those little coins were for, that I stuck inside that spider cross. And so we have no in and out movement, and then we have just a slight bit of drag in there. And so that would be a good final assembly right there. And as you could see from here, I already have these the ring gear wire tied, all these little bolts that hold the ring gear to the differential case. And now you want to go ahead and cotter pin or wire tie these. I'm gonna go ahead and just wire tie all these together, and just basically as a little added safety, I have bought this aircraft safety wire, stainless. I believe it's like, what is it, 032. But yeah, so I'm gonna go ahead and get that done, and we'll move on to the next part of the assembly. Okay, got the differential case bolts all tightened down, and got the safety wire on there. So now this whole part is assembled and done for final assembly. And right here you'll notice a couple little, I guess you could say collars right here. And those are for a little upgrade that I went to for a modern needle bearing type of pinion bearing. I'm sorry, not pinion bearing, carrier bearings. And I went with those just because I wanted to try them, and they might be, I wouldn't say more reliable, because I mean the car's made it this long, and but it's just something like a more modern bearing. Plus I think it was just something that I've always wanted to try as well. So anyway, these actually ride inside of the housing right here, and as you can see, they ride on these needle bearings right here. And so yeah, I have that in, and these are the steel thrust washers that the brass ones ride on top of, and they kind of sandwich in between. This one here goes on the differential housing, and so they kind of just sandwich in between there. And later on I'll tell you about when I was setting the ring and pinion depth. There was a you stack shims underneath here. You know, you pull this one off, and you would put a shim under there to adjust the ring and pinion, backlash. So now we are ready to go ahead and put the axles and assemble this the two halves of the axle housing together. So now it's time to check the backlash between the ring gear and the pinion gear. Earlier I did the contact pattern, so I already have the paint in there. That's why you see the marking compound in there, and which the marking compound is what you do at the end after you do what I'm doing here. I'm just doing this to kind of show the video. And basically the backlash is that the gears hitting each other, that little noise that you'll hear right here. See, so what I'm doing is I'm turning the shaft back and forth slightly like that, and so that's your backlash right there. And So basically what you want to do is, now I have it set up on the pinion gear, and you could have it set up on the ring gear, which I think is the preferred way to do, but I'll do it that way as well, just to kind of show it as an example. And you want your tip of your dial indicator to be about 90 degrees from your pinion gear, or whatever you're measuring off of. So now what I'll do is I'll make sure that down low here, let me get something to point with. I'll make sure that basically one of this tooth right here, let me try this side. I'm not used to doing this kind of stuff, so bear with me a little bit. So basically what you want to do is you want one of your pinion, the teeth on your pinion gear, you basically want it pointed straight down at about the 6 o'clock position, and just so that you're at a mating point between that and the ring gear. And so what you do is, now basically I'll set my dial indicator to a point that's at a 0, you know, just to kind of have a good point to go off of. And what I'll do is you turn it back until you hear it make contact. Go back. So we're at 41 to 49. 41 to 49 and a half. So yeah, see, it's creeping up a little bit. So we're at 42 to 50. So we're at about, our difference is about 8 thousandths. And that's about what you want. I think you want between 8 to 12, 12 being the max. But 8 thousandths is definitely a good rule of thumb, and that's what we're looking for. And you want to check it in multiple spots. You don't want to just do it in one spot. So usually I'll take this dial indicator off, and I'll spin the drive shaft until I get to another point on the ring gear, and I'll check this spot, then I'll come over and I'll check this spot. So yeah, that's basically how you do that. Okay, so now I have the dial indicator set up onto the ring gear, and we'll go ahead and test to see what the backlash was. Now we had 8 thousandths when it was on the pinion gear. Now we're on the ring gear, and we'll see what we get. And I don't think I stated this earlier, but whenever you're moving your gear back and forth, you want to move it enough so that whatever its mating gear is, it does not move. That's what you're testing the backlash on. So whenever you move, say when I move this ring gear, you hear that noise. Now I don't want to move it so far that I move it just like I did right there. You don't want that to move. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put this back. Have the dial indicator on there. Again, I'll put it to a point to where it's kind of at a 0. We'll put it at 80 right there. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and just move it back and forth. Well, that's way too much. Okay. Sometimes things don't always work out perfect, but so we'll just have to do a little math. There's 11, and then that's 18. Well, so the way the angle of this camera is, so we're at 10, and then we're at 18 right there. $11 to 9, 12 to. So basically, yeah, it looks like we got 12 to 20. So 12 to 20. It's 8 thousandths. That's the same measurement we got whenever we were measuring off of the pinion gear, and that's within spec of what we need to get at. So just as like a true check to make sure that we have good contact between the pinion gear and the ring gear, use like a contact compound, and I have yellow stuff. I mean, there's like Permatex that's called Prussian blue, but this is just kind of what I use. And what you're looking for is, see how there's like a scrape right there in the center, where the pinion was contacting the ring gear. And that's pretty much what you want, is like a centralized pattern, centralized contact. And notice how there's paint along the top, there's paint along the bottom, and then there's still untouched paint on the front, right in here, and then same within the back, right along there. So looks pretty good. There's no, the pinion gear is not riding off the edge of the tooth of the ring gear. And you also want to check both sides. You know, there's a drive side and then a coast side, and so you want to check both sides of the gear. And this one looks pretty good as well. So like notice there's some on the top, there's some along the bottom. You get the front, and then the back, there's still paint right there. And so both sides, and usually you want to check at least 3 or 4 spots every 90 degrees. I did, as you could see, a lot more than that, just because I just figured I'd check it around. And but yeah, as you could see, I mean, you got pretty centralized pattern all the way around. And again, you want to do both sides of the gear. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So the whole kit comes with a shaft collar right here that goes on first, and then you slide the assembly over top of that. And then your roller bearing, your taper bearing goes on there. And then from there, the kit that comes with this bearing setup comes with multiple shims. I mean, it comes with a ton of them, and I only needed these 3 right here. So now we'll go ahead and put this on for final assembly. And notice these bearings, or these shims right here, have a little notch for the keyway, and that makes it nice for whenever you're trying to figure out your shim thickness. You don't have to pound the keyway out every time. All you gotta do is just pull the gear off every time. Yeah, I'll be ready to get the garage a little bit cleaned up after this. Got our keyway in. So now that we have the collar, the shaft collar on, the pinion bearing assembly, we have our shims on, we have our keyway on, have the gear on and the nut. And this gear, you don't want to pound it on with a hammer or anything. You want the nut to set how far that goes. And how you do that is with the directions that came with this pinion bearing assembly, you tighten this nut down to 70 foot-pounds, and luckily one end is a square, and so I'm able to have the vise kind of help hold it a little bit for me. So got that all set, and now we are ready to set what is called the pinion bearing preload. So the pinion depth was determined. Geez, clean that all off. The pinion depth was determined with the shim thickness, the shim pack that I determined to put in there. And now your preload is basically your rotational, force to turn the bearing. Now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put this back in the vise. And we're going to set the pinion bearing preload. And basically what the preload is anytime you have a tapered roller bearing, you have to preload. And so there's two things to setting pinion gear. And the one is the pinion depth, where it rides in and out on the gear, which I'll show you in this video. And the second is the preload, which is the rotational force that it takes to turn that bearing. You know, to have like a slight drag. So what you do is push the bearing as far as this whole assembly, as far as it'll go that way. Take the shaft collar, and you're going to tighten the shaft collar up enough that it doesn't want to move by hand, but enough that we can still move it if we tap it with a hammer. And so basically we can still slide it, but it won't come back on us. That's kind of what we're shooting for there. So we have it a little bit tight. Let me make sure that this is open. No, still not much drag on there. Let's tighten it just a little bit more. This time I'm going to try just using the hammer. So that feels pretty good. I mean, there's no in and out, and it has a nice slight little bit of drag to it. Yeah, I think it should be sitting pretty good there. So now I'll give this the shaft collar here one final torque, and it should be there for a while now. Well, everybody, I'm not gonna go much further for the night. Gonna throw in the towel for now, and but we'll be back tomorrow. But we got the pinion bearing set up all on there. Got the cotter pin all nice in there, and so we'll pick up from there tomorrow, and should have a complete rear axle by the end of the video, and that'll be exciting. Then we could get it back in the car and maybe even start it. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.